You are real, right?
I'm as real as a donut, motherfucker.
Hey, what's up everyone, it's Ryan here from The Y, and today we're gonna be taking a look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the penultimate work of Tarantino's career. It's a love letter to filmmaking as a whole, the golden age of Hollywood, and of course feet. I don't know where I'd rank this among his films. Definitely top 5, although maybe I'm just a sucker for the Pulp Fiction-like structure and scenery of vintage Los Angeles. On that note, let's get right into the video. Here's 30 facts you didn't know about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The genesis of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came during the filming of Death Proof, and more specifically, the relationship between Kurt Russell and his stunt double John Casino that fascinated Tarantino. He recalled how they'd worked together for several years, even though there wasn't all too much for Casino to do, yet Russell still asked to have him on set. A few years later, Tarantino put pen to paper and began work on the project he referred to as Magnum Opus. But here's the thing. For the first 5 years, Magnum Opus wasn't a screenplay, it was a novel. Finally, after realizing one day a screenplay better suited the material, Tarantino made the switch and now considers it his most personal script.
Is everybody okay?
Well, the fucking hippies aren't. That's for goddamn sure.
Hot off the heels of someone leaking the script to the Hateful Eight, Tarantino made damn sure the same thing didn't happen with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. For starters, when shopping around for a movie studio, he had everyone send a single representative, forced them to sign a heavy NDA, and forbade them from copying the script or taking it back in any fashion. In fact, there was only a single copy of the third act, which Tarantino stowed away inside a safe. And DiCaprio, Pitt, and Robbie were the only ones allowed to read the screenplay in its entirety. Speaking on Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, Tarantino called them the most dynamic duo since Robert Redford and Paul Newman. And thanks to the two actors getting along so well during production, the prospect of them teaming up again seems more likely than not.
I'm sorry about that.
Here, put these on. Don't cry in front of the Mexicans.
The title of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a direct callback to two of Sergio Leone's films, Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America. Work on Tarantino's set, and there's one rule you have to abide by: no phones allowed. Yep, just like you're back in school again, someone collects your phone as soon as you enter and get caught using one. Though contrary to popular belief, it's not to stop people from taking pictures or leaking details, but it's in place rather to try to get people to focus, connect with each other, and enhance the overall movie-making experience. Set only 24 years apart, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood contains a number of references to Inglourious Basterds. Starting with the fake movie The 14 Fists of McCluskey, it's a direct callback to the finale of Inglourious Basterds, as both take place behind a curtain, deal with the group of Nazis, and of course burning them alive. Then you have Donnie Donowitz's cover name,
Talented cameraman Antonio Margheriti,
which again shows up in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Called Operazione Dynamite, directed by Antonio Margheriti.
Lastly, Red Apple cigarettes make yet another appearance, and Big Kahuna burgers are seen for a quick second as well. During the party at the Playboy Mansion, famed actor Steve McQueen, or the King of Cool, gave us the rundown behind the unconventional nature of Jay Sebring and Sharon Tate's friendship.
Jay loves Sharon, that's what's up.
Though he never makes another appearance. In real life, McQueen was actually supposed to be at Sharon Tate's house the night of the murders. There's conflicting stories over what caused him not to attend, but the most likely account is that he ran into a chickie and ended up spending the night with her instead. It does make you wonder how things might have been different had McQueen been there. The guy legitimately grew up on the streets, was a Marine, and trained with Bruce Lee. Take all those things, along with him most likely being jacked up on cocaine. I'm not saying the outcome would have for sure been different, but if there's anybody you want in a situation like that, it's gotta be this guy. Also, here's a weird coincidence. McQueen once broke Manson's nose after he wouldn't stop pestering him about a script he wrote. Going off that, the police later found a Manson family hit list, and McQueen's name was on there. I'm not sure if that was the cause of his name being on there, although it certainly didn't help. Understandably, this scared the hell out of McQueen and resulted in him carrying a handgun at all times, including at Jay Sebring's funeral where he gave the eulogy. Because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood took such a long time to come to fruition, 2 actors passed away before filming started. James Stacy was originally written with Bill Paxton in mind before his untimely death, and Burt Reynolds was set to take on the role of George Spann before his passing. Though in Reynolds' case, he was able to make a small contribution to the script. Tarantino described how after reading it for the first time, Reynolds came over and said, "So Brad Pitt is playing the stunt guy." Tarantino responded with a "yeah?" And then he said, "Well, you gotta have somebody say."
You know you're kinda pretty for a stuntman.
Quentin Tarantino is notorious for not being a fan of improv. He wants you to say the lines exactly how he wrote them, no questions asked. However, for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he made an exception for none other than Leonardo DiCaprio. Specifically, when it came to this scene, it was DiCaprio's idea to f**k up and forget his lines.
Damn it, I f***ed this whole thing up, Sam. I did. I f***ed this whole thing up. Can we just go back, please? Can we just cut?
And it goes even further than that, as the ensuing sequence with Rick going absolutely ballistic was totally unscripted as well.
You're sitting there like a fucking baboon. All right, make a promise to yourself you're gonna stop fucking drinking.
At this point, it's basically an open secret that Tarantino has a foot fetish. Nearly all of his films make a show of feet on some level, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood being no exception. Off the top of my head, you've got the shot of Pussycat with their feet up on the dashboard, and Sharon Tate's dirty feet in the movie theater. At least with Sharon Tate, there's some historical basis, as she actually never wore shoes unless it was a necessity. Accounts say she'd even go as far as to put rubber bands on her feet to give the illusion of wearing sandals when eating out. But let's not divert from the fact that Tarantino didn't care one bit about all that. He just needed an excuse to put her feet in the film. I feel like that's how all his movies go. He starts with wanting as many feet shots as possible, then works backwards from there and tries to come up with a good logical reason for why they must appear on screen, preferably in his mouth.
Quentin has separated more women from their shoes than the TSA.
In the process of making the film, the producers had a tough time convincing businesses along Hollywood Boulevard to allow them to put 60s style facades on their storefronts. The funny thing is, after shooting concluded and they came back to take them down, many of the same owners asked to keep them as they actually much preferred the look. All in all, the Manson family were convicted of 9 murders, the Tate and LaBianca attacks, musician Gary Hinman, and stuntman turned ranch hand Donald Shorty Shea. Although we're never shown anything related to the LaBianca or Hinman murders, Steve Clem Grogan, or the hippie who Cliff beats up, was one of the people who killed Donald Shea, working as a ranch hand at Spann Ranch. Shorty was killed either for beating Manson up, or because they thought he was a snitch. In my eyes, it was probably a bit of both. Whatever the case, many believe this was Shorty in the background right here, as he was one of the only ranch hands still employed. If that cream-colored Cadillac looked familiar to you, that's because it's the same one featured in Reservoir Dogs. And funny enough, it actually belongs to Michael Madsen. When it came to the following line,
Hey! You're Rick fucking Dalton. Don't you forget it.
it was totally improvised by Brad Pitt and came about from an experience he had early in his career. As Pitt recounted, sometime in the mid-90s he was on set and bitching and moaning to this freeloader he had around, sort of like his character in the film. And the guy came over and said, "Hey man, don't forget, you're fucking Brad Pitt." And obviously, those words meant enough that he remembered them over 2 decades later. While Tarantino is famous for reusing actors, you might not know he also does the same with his movie sets. Case in point, the scene from Bounty Law filmed on Melody Ranch is the same western town found in Django. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood continues the trend of Timothy Olyphant having a quick draw. I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Also, the last we see of his character, James Stacy, is him leaving the set on a motorcycle, a subtle reference to how the real Stacy lost an arm and a leg after a drunk driver crashed into his motorcycle. Don't feel too bad for him though, as he also molested an 11-year-old. Perhaps the movie's biggest controversy centered on Bruce Lee's portrayal. Tarantino responded to the criticism and called Lee an arrogant guy who really didn't give a shit about the stuntmen, which, I don't know, sounds like a load of bullshit. And surprisingly, he almost took it a step further and originally wanted Cliff to outright beat him up. Luckily, the stunt coordinator and Brad Pitt intervened, said they weren't comfortable doing that, and persuaded him to end things with the fight getting broken up.
Let me just say, nobody beat the shit out of Bruce.
Going off the previous fact, there was no one more upset over Bruce Lee's portrayal than his daughter Shannon Lee, calling the depiction inaccurate and unnecessary. Lee did one of the only things she could and appealed to China's National Film Administration, asking them to demand changes be made. Of course, Tarantino declined and China subsequently banned the film, although it's unclear if it was actually due to Bruce Lee's portrayal, or rather an issue of too much graphic violence. Usually, the book comes first and the movie later, but as Tarantino does things his own way, 2 years after the film released, he made it into a novel. Here's a couple of ways it differs from the movie. One person the novel greatly expands on is the mysterious Cliff. We learn that he served in World War II, and not just served, but killed over 16 Japanese soldiers with just a knife, was then taken as a POW, and walked away with 2 medals of honor. The story was so ridiculous they even made it into a movie. But while he was a war hero, Cliff did kill his wife by shooting her with that harpoon gun. The silver lining being that he immediately regrets doing so and tries in vain to save her. The heroic Brandy gets a backstory as well. Basically, a friend of Cliff's named Buster Cooley owed him money, though instead of paying him back, Cooley offers him a 50-50 stake in the undefeated fighting dog Brandy. The pair toured all over California, winning countless dogfights and thousands of dollars, until one day, Buster sets her up to lose and tells Cliff to bet against her. This rubs Cliff the wrong way and he ends up killing Buster. Oh, and Cliff also murders 2 people in the middle of a crowded restaurant. So yeah, the movie version of him was pretty tame. Another huge difference is the placement of the film's ending sequence. As in the book, it takes place very early on, and actually leads to newfound fame for Rick Dalton and a regular spot on The Tonight Show. The novel dives into the Manson family more thoroughly, and dedicates a chapter to something they did in real life called the creepy crawl, basically invading someone's house in the dead of night. Pussycat undertakes her first solo creepy crawl by prowling naked through an old couple's home and jumps on their bed, scaring the shit out of them. And finally, the ending of the novel actually came from a deleted sequence that Tarantino said was his favorite scene in the entire script. Namely, after Rick's first day on Lancer, he and Trudy share a heartfelt phone call in which they reminisce on how lucky they are to be actors before doing a reading of the next day's lines. Tarantino said he and DiCaprio were both in tears following the reading, yet when it came time to put the movie together, it sadly didn't fit in.
I don't like names, like Pumpkin Puss, but since you're upset, we'll talk about that some other time.
Kurt Russell and Zoe Bell play the husband-wife duo working as stunt coordinators. The reference here is twofold. Kurt Russell previously played stuntman Mike in Death Proof, and Zoe Bell is a real-life stuntwoman who played herself in the same film and was Uma Thurman's stunt double in both Kill Bills. Lastly, the first Kill Bill features the theme to the Green Hornet. The same movie they were shooting in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In case you were unsure, during the showing of The Wrecking Crew, that was the real Sharon Tate.
Oh, I'm Freya. Welcome to Denmark, Mr. Helm.
Even with the little screen time he had, Damon Harriman gave a sublime performance as Charles Manson, both creepy and unsettling. It also nearly got a little kooky as shown by this deleted sequence. Harriman also portrayed Manson in the show Mindhunter, and just by chance, the filming was separated by only a couple of weeks. While Tarantino never sought Roman Polanski's blessing, he did meet with Sharon Tate's sister, Deborah, on multiple occasions. And while she was opposed to the movie at first, skeptical at best, after seeing how it wasn't a retelling of history, Deborah gave her blessing and even loaned out some of her sister's jewelry to add to the film's authenticity. Even great directors sometimes make mistakes. And seeing as how the speedometer here never goes past 0 for the entire drive, Tarantino is no exception. Also, because the film is set in 1969, it would have been impossible for them to ride on a Boeing 747, as its first commercial flight was in 1970. During the sequence outside the El Coyote restaurant, Sharon and Jay briefly discussed the premiere of a new adult movie.
What's going on at the dirty movie place?
Well, they're having a premiere.
Dirty movies have premieres?
The theater in question, formerly known as the Eros, later closed down and rebranded into the theater now owned by Tarantino, the New Beverly Cinema. And on the topic of theaters, you know that scene where Sharon Tate uses her name to get entry into her own film.
What if I'm in the movie?
Well, that was based on a real experience Tarantino had taking a date to see True Romance. Here's how you know you've made it: when the city of Los Angeles shuts down freeways so you can film a movie. And that's exactly what happened with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as the 90 and 101 were shut down for hours at a time, allowing for only vintage cars. The third act was unexpected, chaotic, and wildly satisfying. And surprisingly, it was also the first part of the story that Tarantino came up with. The ending sequence wove together fact and fiction, along with what must have been a bit of cathartic violence on Tarantino's end. Much of the fiasco was obviously the result of an active imagination. Yet in real life, Tex actually said this line right before the murders.
I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business.
Even creepier is that they found the actual 1959 Ford Galaxy used in the crime, but decided not to put it in on grounds of it being way too eerie. Finally, if there's one question Tarantino's sick of hearing, it's gotta be this.
But why are you so sure that there's no link between enjoying movie violence and enjoying real violence?
So when the Manson family members echoed those same sentiments while in the car,
If you grew up watching TV, that means you grew up watching murder. We kill the people who taught us to kill.
you gotta imagine what happened next was sorta like a big fuck you to all those people. Because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood premiered at Cannes 2 months before its general release, Tarantino pleaded with the audience to not spoil the ending. Let's just say he sorta got his wish. Shortly after Cannes, someone posted the ending on Wikipedia, only most of it was fake. There were a few truths sprinkled in, like the part of Cliff and his dog going on a killing spree, and Dalton using the flamethrower to finish one of them off. Everything else was a bit more on the creative side, as they had Bruce Lee showing up saying he'd been observing the family for days on suspicion of possible violence, Sharon Tate using her kung fu skills to take out the other members, and even Charles Manson getting blown away by Booth with a shotgun after coming to check on things. Throughout the film, Cliff Booth is undoubtedly a good friend to Rick Dalton.
That sounds like a good friend. I tried.
Good friend, Cliff.
I tried.
Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Alright, till next time, have a great day everyone.